It's been about 5 years since I started my journey into the games industry. When I first started, all I wanted to really do was follow in the footsteps of a lot of the creators that I grew up with as a child, creating some of my fondest childhood memories. Going from one of my very first projects in university, where I was working with a few classmates on designing a ball-rolling golf game, knowing little to nothing about game design or Unreal Engine at all, to finishing my master's degree about 4 years later, leading my own project, creating a collectathon about a small platypus, spending hours and hours trying to learn the intricate systems that make games like Mario 64 or Hat in Time. Since that time in 2020, I think I've come quite a way with my skills and knowledge, which brings us to this very video and the project that I'm going to be undertaking. Out of the many games I remember playing as a kid, there's always one that I kept going back to, and it was only until recently when I had a nostalgic playthrough that I actually finally 100%ed this game for the first time. Doing this has really made me want to try and recreate this in Unreal Engine 5. Now, if the title wasn't a giveaway to what this game is, I'm of course talking about Britain's favourite people. They were bread makers, they were wool makers, astronauts, inventors, pest controllers. Damn it, I thought I had a lot of hobbies. I'm of course talking about Wallace and Gromit, more notably the 2005 Konami published video game adaptation of Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, developed by our lovely developers at Frontier, which you might know for stuff like Elite Dangerous, Planet Coaster 2, Planet Zoo, Jurassic World Evolution, the Formula 1 games, the list goes on. This game had such a grip on my childhood. As a huge fan of the franchise, the game just took my love for collecting and put it into a purely physics-based action platformer. Taking the Lancashire area, or Wigan, depending on what you think. I've tried looking this up with Wallace and Gromit, there's really no way to tell. And filling it with lovable characters, monstrous enemies, and a plethora of game mechanics and game styles. And there's, of course, this part. For anyone who has not had the pleasure of playing this game, let me clue you in on the basics of the story. This game allows you to take control of either our pragmatic pooch Gromit or our cheese-loving inventor Wallace as they run their pest control business, capturing rabbits to stop them devouring all the vegetables in sight. Equipped with the entire sewer system of the town and some trusty bun vacs, your job is to clean up the escaped rabbits that have appeared all over town, the main collectible being small anti-pesto cards that are rewarded for solving puzzles, exploring, beating children at football and glowing right in their faces. We are the good guys in this game, right? Anyways, how can we take this from 2005 and bring it into a loving environment of Unreal Engine 5? Well, let's start with assets. Can't make a Wallace and Gromit game without the starring cast. Now, I've never hunted for assets from other games before. I know ripping them must be possible, but this is not something I'm going to be able to find on the Unreal store, and my skill set with 3D modeling is nowhere near the level I wish it was. But I did find a very handy website called Model Resource, which had everything I could possibly want in terms of models, near enough every NPC, enemy, creature, collectible, and of course our 3 stars of this game. But before we get into our 3rd star of this game, I think we should start with the dynamic duo themselves. We'll start with Wallace and Gromit, and out of the two, I think we will start with our silent, sassy canine, Gromit. First things first, we're going to download and unpack this model, and we're going to pop it into Blender. For anyone who doesn't know what Blender is, that's a bit of 3D modeling software, completely free. It can even be found on Steam. When everything was unpacked, there was a few things that came with the model as additions. So while we have our glorious main model, here we can see Gromit, it also came with 2 bun vacs, which are the weapons of the game. You can also see some random bits of mesh in the side there. That is the umbrella ability. So in the game, there is an ability you unlock later on for the bun vac, which will allow you to pop out a sort of umbrella glider. Those are the meshes for that, which is very handy for later. This mesh is also quite handy as the hat and the boots are also independent of the main model. This means we can either keep them as they are, or we can do some interesting stuff later on, which I'll show you, especially for the hat, on how we're going to equip that to Gromit in Engine. One crucial missing component was a rig, or at very least a rig that's matched to the Unreal skeleton. Not having much experience in animation can make things a little bit more tricky. Luckily for me, I can do a lot with Unreal Engine's huge library of animation packs, but I just need to get the skeleton to match the mesh. This is definitely a problem I run into before, by the way. Anytime I've done a project and replaced the main player model, it's always been a problem of not having the animation skill set to animate them unless they are an Unreal product, for example. But luckily, a little Blender plugin called Auto Rig Pro can come into play here. This program allows you to rig models and assists in creating a skeleton to match. It also lets you rig models to the Unreal Engine skeleton. So in theory, we should be able to rig the model and then replace the Unreal mesh with our new one. Now this is a fairly straightforward tool. It typically asks for the mesh and then asks you to place key reference points like neck bones, feet bones, knee bones, shoulder bones, wrists, etc, etc. Once done, it will then generate a skeleton. Some settings may need tweaking in the future, so this was very much a trial and error to get the proportions correct. But the end result after a few attempts was something that worked. It took some slight animation blueprinting to change a few offset positions to stop Gromit leaning forward and some of the bones looking a bit weird. But for now, it looks pretty good. Definitely a good starting point to continue on with. Now you may notice that our model did not have his hat on when we finished. And that's because I wanted to add this separately because it could lead to a very fun system later on. So instead of keeping the hat as a fully attached mesh to our soon-to-be player character, I want to use sockets. Hi, this is James from the future here. Just wanted to go over a few things that I didn't really go over when we were talking about the animations just before we get into sockets. So this stuff here in our animation, just wanted to sort of show how we did stuff a little bit more in here. So what we've got is we've got a few animations being played in each sort of state using the built-in Unreal State machine. So we have our idle and our walk and run for a moment because that's all we really need at the minute. From there, we just got the usual stuff. What I've done is in the main animation blueprint itself, or in the animation graph, I've changed a few of the cache poses and also as a sort of temporary sequence, blended a few poses together for the main sort of walking stance. So this is where in the game I'll splice in some footage here for it. But in the game, you will notice that for the most part, when they're walking with the gun out and they're sort of, you know, Wallace or Gromit doing their thing with the gun, they're usually holding it forward and you can still walk around. I wanted to keep that in, which is what this blend pose is for. So effectively what this does is it will take two poses and blend them to a specific bone. In this instance, what we can do then, if I was to just go over to the details panel, you can pick a specific bone out of the skeleton. And with that then, you can use that bone and it will basically play one animation above that bone, and everything below that bone in the hierarchy system will have the other animation play in. This is quite handy in Unreal for playing things, or okay, effectively it's quite handy for playing animations that are subsequently two different animations for different just blended together really. So think in a shooter you'd have it for if you're aiming a gun, instead of having a run animation and then a run while holding the gun animation, you can basically just have both of those animations be separate and then blend them together using the top half, which you would need for the aiming, so anything from the spine up, and then anything from the spine down, which is all the leg work, will be all the walking animation. And what this does then is it basically just blends those together, and from there we basically have a blend poses by boolean, which is whether or not we want to do this. So we're either going to use the cached poses, which is the animation, which is just the standard animations that are coming from the state machine. So in that case, it'll be the running. And then if this boolean is true, it will use the bun gun equipped, which will be when it blends both of these animations together. If it's false, it'll just use the cached animation, which will be before it goes through this. So it's effectively just using this. Another way this would usually look is if instead what we would usually have is just this to this, and then that would subsequently just play the animation without anything else. But with this extra bit of logic, what we've got is just the animations being blended together based on this boolean. And this boolean, you can see that we've targeted in the player. We'll go into that a bit more when we get to the coding segment, but I just wanted to clear that up a bit more just so people weren't a bit confused by it. And if anyone was wondering and you're just starting out, at least you know exactly what you're looking at there. These two are very handy for sort of blending things together that way. So sockets. Sockets are incredibly fun. So here we have what looks like the base Unreal skeleton. Now, the cool thing that we've done here with how we've set up the model within Blender and using Auto Rig Pro is we can basically piggyback off of the already existing Unreal skeleton. So on the left here you can see you've got absolutely everything to do with the skeleton. It has full hand movements, it has everything you could ever want, all put into a nice neat hierarchy. I've already popped in the sockets that we needed. So in this instance what we've done is we will attach to specific bones what we call a socket, that then we can manipulate later on using code. So to give you an idea of how that's actually working here, what we have is we need 3 sockets in total at the moment. We're going to want one on the top of the character's head, one on their back, and then one in their hand as well. So if I just go to the back first, you can see within the hierarchy of spine 1, we have something called a back slot. And if you're wondering how you add a socket, you just right click the bone and then you can add a socket and then you just name that socket. So I've just called this one back slot. If I go down a bit more as well, we should see that another one has been added as well. I'm just trying to figure out where. There's the head or the hat socket, or in this case, the hat-ocket. That's a bit of a spelling mistake on my end, but that's fine. And then in one of the hands as well, we will have the bun gun hold socket, and that's the hand there then where the bun gun will be held. So that's our 3 sockets. Once they're all added, that's all we have to do there. So this skeleton is effectively what this guy is rigged to as well. The best way to test if that's the case as well is when you're in any of these sort of skeleton mesh tools in Unreal Engine, you have everything you need linked to that skeleton up here. So we have the animation blueprint that this mesh is linked to. We have some of the animations. There's the physics asset for when we want to do physics-based stuff with them. The actual mesh, which is what we're in at the moment, and then you can click the skeleton and then that will automatically open the skeleton that this is attached to. So it's attached to the default sk_mannequin, and you can see the preview mesh here is the skeleton. If we were to change this preview mesh to our current rigged grommet, it will change no problem at all and still work fine. So we know that's all right. So now we just need to attach the meshes to the sockets themselves. So to do this, this is where we get into the coding and the actual third-person character blueprint. Once again, we're piggybacking off of the Unreal Engine's default, just so that we have something to sort of start with. Because the actual one we start with does have a lot of the things we already need, so we can just sort of use that and continue onwards and sort of mold it into our own. So I've tweaked it all in post. This is the beauty of starting a video series. Where you start a project and start a video series, you end up doing it all and then having to explain it to the camera or recreate it. So I thought I'd just give it an explanation. So this is what we've got as a final. This also has a few of the arrows, as you can see, for some of the other things I want to be working on with it, but we'll get into that another time. So let's have a little look at what we've got here. So as you can see on our little components tab up here, what we've got is we've got a few things here. So we've got hat, we've got bun gun hold, we've got the back bun gun, and we've also just got all the usual stuff you'd get, cameras, meshes, that kind of stuff. So we've got our mesh changed over to grommet, and as you can see, things are already positioned, which is great. Only one of the bun guns are showing at the moment because I've changed that in code, which we will get to. But at the moment, as you can see, what we've got is if I was to click on, let's take the hat for an example. So the hat is there and it's just a static mesh. So if I just click this, it's just a static mesh component. You can get those if you just press add there, static mesh, and you can add either just the static mesh there, or you can add the basic shape and change it if you really want to. But what you've got then is on the right, you'll have the little static mesh that you can change. So you can change that to anything. It can be anything you really need. So we've just got the hat as a separate object imported, and we're using that. And that comes then with its texture from the file when it was imported as well. And then just above the static mesh, you'll see sockets. Here, what we've got then is we've got it to the hat socket, or the hat-ocket, because of the spelling mistake. I should change that. I'll probably do that a little later just for clarity. But to sort of attach it, really, you can either type it, I believe, or you can just press this and it will give you an entire list of the the bones and the sockets that you can attach to. So in that case then you can just do hat socket and it will just change that, or whatever you've named your own socket. If you're following along for any reason, whatever you've named it, you can call it that as well, and that'll show up there. And that is everything there. You can then transform it if you really need to move it about. So if I was to just change the location, you can see that that'll move as well if it's absolutely necessary, but for the most part we don't need to do that with this one because it lines up just fine. And the good thing with sockets then is we don't have to individually animate that. It'll just follow the already animated skeleton, which means when we're running in game we'll be able to see that. Same goes then for the bun gun on the back, and then the bun gun that's going to be in the hand as well. These look a bit weird, but they have been positioned in a way that they work with our current animation. So it's just about sort of repositioning them with these transforms if you really need to. And what we'll do from here now is we will jump into the coding section of the player character, and I'll just show you around what I've done a bit more there, just so you can get an idea of how things are looking at this point. And then we can have a little discussion about where we're going to go from here, because this video is getting on a little bit now already. So I just want to make sure that we have an idea of where we might be going next and what to expect next time as well. Okay, let's show around this code a little bit. So if we pop into our event graph, so you've got your usual input stuff that comes with the Unreal character by default. So that's your movement. And I've also added some input actions myself, which I'll show off as well, just to show you how that's going. So what I've set up here is some basic attacking for later on when we want to do attacks. Some AI stuff for the characters as well, because remember this is a game where we can play as Wallace or Gromit. When you're not playing one, they follow the other. So it's good to have a sort of basic AI pathing system set up there. I've not done much of the AI stuff in Unreal, so this is a bit new to me. So any advice on making these systems better is greatly appreciated, especially in the AI area. But for now, we've just got this move towards player, which we will come into later. Trying to keep as many things off the event tick as we can. So this is something that runs every frame of your game, and it's usually used to dictate very simple logic. The more stuff you have on here, the more things that become frame dependent and could potentially sometimes cause a bit more lag. So we try to keep things off there if possible. And then our begin play, which has everything that starts. Move towards player is also on here. So that will be triggering this event, but we'll go through it a bit by bit just to show it off a bit. We got our switch character there, which is switching through the game mode, which is another separate blueprint that will open up as well. And then stuff to do with possession as well, which is also for switching characters. And then the long, laborious button back code, which I've started, which I'm still not entirely sure how we're going to do. But let's just show off what we've got in game first, and then we will go through how it works. So we have our lovely Gromit. As you can see, he's got some very flappy ears. He's just sort of playing around with things a bit there. It's not the best, but it works. If I press left click, he pulls out his gun off his back, and then after a while we'll put it back if it's not in use. And then if I hold right click, we get this big box in front of us, which is sort of tracing as if it was a vacuum. And if I was to just sort of run into this here, it pulls it into me, and that's about it. This is sort of the left click is going to be the attack. It's just not animated yet, but it will eventually attack. I just want it to pull out and then go away after a while. And then this will just stay out as long as we're holding right click. Got your jump, which all works fine. Double jump works fine, which is great. And that's everything that we need for that portion at least. As you can see, the hats and the gun do stay exactly where they need to be. That arrow is just to show where the invisible part of the gun is at the moment. And yeah, everything is fine except that it's a bit of a bug with how I've had to set up the physics. It's something to do with the ears being a physics asset and the weighting of stuff, but it's a work in progress. We're not going to worry too much about the physics for now. So let's just jump into how this actually all works. So before we get into the sort of character following stuff, let's just get into some of the nice, easy, simple things of the attacking. So what we've got here is an enhanced input action. So for anyone who's known Unreal for a while, this is something that I had to recently relearn. This is something that was added in Unreal 5 and is now fully fledged and replaces the old inputs system. So if you were doing stuff on Unreal 4, in the past what you would do was you'd go into your project settings, you'd go into input, and then under input you will have your input actions typically. Where are they? There they are. Your action mappings and your axis mappings. You would add to these, and what you would end up doing is you'd add an action mapping, you'd call it whatever, you'd then add actual keys to it. So, you know, you'd add like a left mouse button for like interact or attack or whatever, like whatever, and you can call that later on in blueprints then to be used. We don't use those anymore. That is something that it's not mainstream anymore. We've got something a bit nicer, a bit simpler. So if I go to our third-person blueprints, we have, it's not in blueprint, it's in input. In input we have the default IMC. This is effectively our input mapping context. This is what's replaced it. You put your input mappings in here, you give them everything that you would do typically in the project settings. So for example, you got the usual ones for like jumping, moving, looking, attacking jumping, moving and looking. We've added switch character, suction, attack, and then we've also given some triggers and also a few buttons that they will be used on. So we've got some controller ones set up for later on, but we press tab to switch character, press right mouse button to use the button back to circle, and we press left mouse button to attack. And with these then, these use these input mappings, so this IA_attack, which you can then find in the actions here, so you can create your own runs of these. So if I was to open up the let's open up the attack one, because that's a nice simple one. This is everything is what it is. It's you can add modifiers, triggers. This allows you to make very cool combinations of buttons, so you can have multiple buttons be pressed to sort of cause a specific action to take place. Is what these can be used for. So these are much more in depth and a lot more viable and a lot more malleable in comparison to the old inputs section in the project settings. Both work fine. This system is new. I wanted to give it a go, and with the sort of button combinations, it could potentially be stuff we might need that for in the future. So it's always good to just use that just in case. So how are we using these? Back in our third-person character, we have this input action IA attack. So this is what we're doing. So let's just go through this one by one. We are, the very first thing we are doing is using a boolean, which we've got bun gun equipped. You might recognize that from earlier on in our animations, in our animation blueprint. This is set to true. So this is being set to true, so the player knows that the bun gun is now equipped in the player's hands, which means then that this will change to blend poses as well. So this will stop being this normal one and will then blend the poses automatically, which is exactly what we want. We are clearing timers in preparation. So we have an attack timer that we create later on. So we're just clearing that just in case this is anything else in there that's already running for some reason. If people are spamming the button, we could have a lot of timers overlapping. So we're just making sure that if there was any timer, we're clearing it and making sure it's not valid anymore. We then set a timer for 3 seconds and we start an event on that 3 seconds. After that 3 seconds, sorry. So as soon as that timer is started, we save that value into the attack timer, and we then set the visibility of the back run gun to be invisible, and we set the one that's being held to be visible. So we're just swapping those around. And then after 3 seconds, if this is not re-triggered, this gets triggered. So that's the cool thing about clearing and invalidating a timer. It will basically stop this event happening, because if the timer is invalidated, this event never triggers. So after 3 seconds, if it does trigger, we can then set the back one to be visible and the one in your hands to be invisible, and we're setting the bun gun to be unequipped. Very basic stuff. We're just turning on and off a mesh based on a timer, so automatic stuff as well, which is really nice. And that happens every time we press left mouse button. A bit more complicated this one, but this is what I've got for the sucking effectively. So we've got the very similar thing that we had before. So when it starts, we equip the gun. We are changing the max walk speed of the character. This is to slow them down, because you in the game as well, once you're using that gun, they're very focused on making sure that the gun is stable, so your walk speed is a bit impeded. Later on, this will eventually have its own sort of movement set up where the player handles a bit differently. You know, they sort of face the target that they're targeting, that kind of thing. And then once it's completed, we unequip the gun straight away and set everything back to normal. Eventually these will be replaced with a sort of actual function that will reset all parameters to default. This is what I've been experimenting with the suction stuff. So it looks a bit complicated. I won't go into the big complicated math of it for anyone who finds it a bit daunting, because myself, it takes me a second or two to sort of look around it. But effectively, we've got a branch which checks if this item found is true or false. If it's found something, it will play a movement based on a few things. So this is a timeline. This will basically do something from 0 to 1, or in this instance, it's doing something from 0 to 5. So over the length of 5 seconds, it will continually gradually go upwards until it reaches completion. It can be used to sort of do very basic animations with things. So what I'm doing is, with this found actor, which we will get from elsewhere down here when you go down the other route, we are basically getting its location, and we are doing a loop, which is effectively a linear linear interpolation of getting from A to B. So as you can see, there's linearly interpolates between A and B based on alpha. So this alpha is going to be basically a percentage of how far this timeline is along, and then A is the actor's location we find with the bun vac, so where they are, and then B is our actor's location, so that's the player, and we are basically saying the position of A needs to be at position B by the end of this timeline of 5 seconds. And then we're just setting that actor location based on that vector. And what we are then doing is, if the distance of this loop is less than or equal to 30, so if there's less than 30 units or exactly 30 units between them, it will destroy the actor, reset the found actor to be 0, and set item found to also be false again, which will then trigger this to come back down this false route. And this is where we are tracing for objects and trying to find that found actor. So what we're doing here is we are getting the world location of the point of suck, which is a little arrow component on the actual mesh itself, on the actual actor of the character. So just to give you an idea where that is, if I click that in here, that's this little arrow below them. So that's basically the end of the gun, because that is where the point of suction is happening. And what we are doing then is we are getting that location, and we are getting its forward vector, so which way it's facing, times it by 300, and then adding that to it for the end. So we're looking 300 in the forward direction of that gun, so just directly in front of it. We're looking for things, objects of world dynamic, and we are making an array of actors to ignore, which in this case will be self. So we're just getting it to ignore itself because we don't want the bun gun, or we don't want the third person, the character, to pick up itself. We are then running that every sort of frame that this is active or triggered. So once that is running, we then get the out hit result, and we break that down. We look for hit actors. We check to see if that has an interface of suckables. So if anyone doesn't know what an interface is, in essence, you can create an interface, add an interface to any object in the game, and then we can search to see if that object has it. This is basically going to go on any of our blueprints for what can be interacted with the bun gun itself. So your creatures, some items in the game can be picked up and moved with it. All of that will be handled with this, and then each item will decide how it wants to be handled by that by the bun vac itself. If it does find something, we say, yep, it's found an item. We'll set the item that it's found to be the found actor, and then we will say item found, which will then put it back up into here, and that's how it loops. At the moment, this is where the storage of the item will be in the end. So this later on will no longer destroy the actor, but will sort of store it in the gun itself somehow. That's what I'm still not sure on. So any advice on that as well, happy to have a little look into. Only current idea I can really think of at the moment is not deleting the object necessarily, but storing it out of bounds and then bringing it back where it needs to, and then just making it look like it's in the gun using a mesh. But that's everything we have for that at the moment, and it does work as this. It's just about getting that final bit of play there and then sort of figuring out some more of the movement stuff. But it's a nice place to start. So I thought we'd jump straight into the switch character stuff as well while we're here, just so people can see how we've done that. So first thing I've done is I have got the game mode set up. So what we try to do in programming is something called encapsulation. That basically means anything that does not need to necessarily control another thing should be controlled by itself. So in that case, if you are going to have realistically, I should do it this way. This gun stuff should be encapsulated into its own blueprint for the bun vac, because the bun vac should control what it's doing, not the actual player. But for now, just for simplicity, I've kept it here just so I know where it all is, and I haven't got so many things open. But effectively what we've got is we don't want anything to do with the switching of the player to be reliant on the player necessarily. We want it to be as much as possible focused on the game mode. So that's what this game mode is for. So let me just show you what we've got in the game mode. So first thing we do is create a reference so we can use it in here and just sort of call things if we need to. But then in the game mode, we have the switch character. Now this is very basic and probably will change eventually. But this is the best way I could get it to work. So what I've got is I have got upon this switch character happening, we get all the actors of the class BP third person. So ideally there's only going to be 2 for now, but if we wanted more players, there's no reason why we couldn't. And what we will do, we will check their tags, which is something you can add to any object or item, and this will basically be like a little identifier for us. So in this case, if I was to go to our third person character, which we've got here, which is our base character, we have a blueprint for Gromit and a blueprint for Wallace, just because they're going to have slightly varying things they're going to do later on. So they all stem from this BP third person character. This is known as the parent, and then the 2 children will be Gromit and Wallace in this instance. So if I was to go into Gromit, as you can see, there's nothing in this blueprint at all at the moment, other than if I type in tag, we've got a tag here which just says Gromit, so we've just named it. And subsequently then in Wallace, we also have a tag in here where we have called him Wallace, and we will have one later for our third character Hutch, which will just be Hutch as well. And what we're doing is we're checking those tags, and we're checking if our player character's tag is not the same as the one that is currently being looped through. So for example, if we're Gromit and we get Gromit's tag, we know they're going to be the same, so this will show false and do nothing. Whereas if it's Wallace, we'll be like, okay, that new one is now the player. And once we've got that, we can say, okay, cool, unpossess our current character and possess this new one, which is the player. So we're possessing a different pawn. So what this would look like then in game is if I just chuck a random Wallace in the level, which I've also rigged up to the same skeleton stuff. I just haven't done that on camera because it's very much more of the same. But he looks glorious except for this bit of mesh buckling here, but that's fine. So if I go in now, you'll see that we've already got a bit of walking with him. So he'll sort of follow us quite closely at the minute just for the basic AI stuff. But if I press tab, we now are playing as Wallace, and you can see Gromit follows us instead. He works the exact same. And you can see that he works there as well, and we can switch back, and we continue to switch as much as we want. And that is basically us possessing and unpossessing another character, and that's all working fine. No matter how many times we click it, it changes fine. Eventually this camera system will be independent of itself, meaning we won't have this weird juttery camera change because of the cameras. So let's have a little look at how we actually change between them and sort of see how the little bits of background are being handled on them following and that kind of stuff, because none of that is automatic. So in our player, we have the input action switch character. We are getting the game mode reference from earlier, and we are just calling this switch character function that we created in there. So when we press this button, which is tab, we then switch character, and that's it. From there then, we are looking down this way for get player location. So this is running constantly on each player or each variant of the third person character and their children. So in this instance, we are, getting it for Wallace and Gromit at the same time. Here, what's happening then is we are, if I press into this, we are just getting the tracking position of the player. via the follow point. So the player references follow point, which is another arrow that is just behind the player themselves. We're getting that location in the world and setting it as the tracking position. And then from there, once the event begin plays, we will do a move towards player. This will start the AI on its tracking. So if we go in here, then we'll check if this player controller is valid, because if it's not, then we're just going to get an error thrown up for a few first frames. So it's good to just check that, otherwise it won't run anything, just to keep things nice and clean there. We're casting to the third person, and we are calling that the player reference. The reason we are doing this is because we need a target actor that isn't itself, because not all of the actual third person characters are going to be active at the same time. You can't play them all. So doing it this way will help us figure out exactly which reference is our player. We are then moving self, so whichever instance of the blueprint it is, to that target actor at the destination of its tracking POS, which will just be behind it. And then once that's successfully done that, we just run it again, because we don't want it to just do it once. We want to do it continuously. So it just runs it again, just in case it gets there. And what I'll do is I'll just show you what that does. If I just untick that, so what will happen is he'll get to me and he will never follow on again. So we're just recalling that just to make sure that they are actually following. And then we're just doing a bit of cleanup on possession and unpossession. This is an event that you can get which is based on possession. So when something is unpossessed, this will automatically get called and run. So it has an output then of the old controller, so we can get the reference to what used to be controlled versus what's now being controlled. But what we're basically doing is we're just spawning a default controller and we're moving towards the player again. And this is just because when you unpossess from something, that target no longer has a controller, which means we just need to give it the default so it has a brain again that is not being overwritten by us, and that will just move that player along. It's very basic, but it does exactly what it needs to for the moment. And that is pretty much where I've got to so far with this project. This project is very early, of course, and I don't usually have a super amount of time to work on it, but what I have done so far I'm really enjoying. I've made a little Trello which I'm sort of using to keep track of progress, just to give people an idea of what we'll be going into in the coming videos, hopefully. So we got a lot to do with the player character at the moment. Me just leaving a few bits and pieces here then for myself and what I need to keep an eye out for. We've got a lot of abilities to look into, just a lot of movement for each character, some misc controls like the AI, and just some general bugs as well, which I'm not sure if that runs in place when still does it, but I'll have a look. We got creature AI and day AI, so AI for rabbits, squirrels, chickens, goats, sheep, hedgehogs, turkeys. All of these are enemies that you would just sort of pests you would see during the day in certain levels, all have unique ways of being handled, so that's going to be something to look into. And then the creature AI at night subsequents as well, which are pretty much the same type of deal, except you would be attacking more. Stuff to do with the camera manager as well, looking at a few things on that as well. In the meantime, it needs to be character independent and zoom in and out possible. It's going to be a few things that I need to look into, but we'll be exploring that as we go on. And then there's the many other sort of mini games that we have along the lines of switches, buttons and levers, all things that just need a bit of work, and same thing with button back. One of the things I haven't figured out is the level design. I can't find anywhere that actually has the levels for me to grab myself and just sort of rip directly from the vial. I've tried looking, I can't find those anywhere just yet. So if anyone does know where they could be and they have any methods to find them, do let me know. I've tried ripping them from the source files myself, but they've been unsuccessful. But if we need to do a bit of level design recreation, that could also be a very fun way of doing things. But, you know, we'll see how it goes. For now, we're going to focus a bit more on the actual player character and just sort of the gameplay, and we will see how it goes. If you have enjoyed this video, then please do feel free to leave a like, a comment, or anything along those lines. It does help quite a lot. And if you're excited to see more, do feel free to subscribe as well, just so that you can actually see the next part when it comes out. Can't really put a concrete time on that, but I do enjoy working on this, so hopefully we'll have it out in the coming months or so for it, once we have a bit of progress. I'll leave a link to all my socials as well, so if anyone wants to sort of find me on Twitter and stuff, you can find me always on there as well. Just to if you have anything you want to sort of say to it, leave it in the comments, Twitter, anything along those lines, and we can we'll sort of reconvene on it once we have a bit more going with this. This project is very fun so far, and I'm really excited to continue with it. And while we are in the very early phases of just getting things in the preps app, I feel like once we start really getting into the meat of this game and start recreating some of the really iconic bits, it's going to be a blast. Well, that's all from me in that case then. I will see everybody in the next video, hopefully when we have a bit more things to sink our teeth into.